Good evening. You may be seated, please. Thank you. We are about to start, so I still ask you to be seated, please. My name is Takalingu Saketa. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Center for Development Research of University of Bonn. My field of research is migration and employment, specifically on Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa. Tonight, I will briefly introduce you the programs that we will have here in the town hall. We'll give you a brief remark about the co-host, then followed by that, we will have a public lecture from Mr. Strife Masivo. Followed by that, we will have a moderator lead discussion with you, the audience, with Fred Swaniker. Then after that, we will have, of course, a reception. Once again, guten Abend. Let me hear the voice of youth. Good evening. Good evening. Dear ladies and gentlemen, interested and supportive of Africa, dear colleagues from Africa, we are pleased that so many of you are here tonight. It is my great honor and privilege to welcome you on the behalf of the Center for Development Research of Bonn University and the AGRA to the Town Hall meeting with Strife Masivo here in Berlin. Allow me to extend my special appreciation to the co-host organizer, Professor Joachim von Braun of ZEF. Under his leadership, ZEF is helping to ensure a focus on Africa youth leaders at this town hall. Tonight, we will listen to the insights from Mr. Strife Masivo, an accomplished African leader, an entrepreneur, and a philanthropist who has been transforming lives and become a source of inspiration for many. This meeting is special and unique because it brings together African youth in Germany from various cities and walks of life to open up direct communication with African leaders, entrepreneurs, private sector, civil society, and scholars, as well as German communities. We hope that this meeting is a beginning to bring African youth based in Germany together in support of African development. 2/3 of the African population is below 29 years of age. The majority of them live in rural areas. In fact, Africa is the only continent where the rural youth population is still growing. If these youth are equipped with proper skills and resources, there are huge opportunities to secure a demographic dividend. As young African experts studying and working in Germany, as representatives of the African diaspora community, as entrepreneurs and the civil society representatives, each one of us has a role to play to achieve the positive transformation of rural Africa. More than 100 years ago, a different conference about Africa took place here in Berlin. In 1884, then the Chancellor of German Empire, Otto von Bismarck, convened representatives from Europe and the US at the Berlin Conference to divide up Africa among the colonial powers. Today, Germany has a very different engagement with Africa, characterized by important positive initiatives, such as the Marshall Plan with Africa, the Compact with Africa, and the One World No Hunger initiative. This initiative must be for the long run. We African youth are ready to contribute to the success of these initiatives. I also point to the Berlin Charter on creating opportunities with the young generation in the rural world that had been developed in the context of G20 with over 100 youth from Africa, Asia, Latin America, as well as Germany. We want to see more follow-up actions, and as young Africans, we are ready to engage in such actions. As African youth living in Germany, whether we engage in research, development, or business, we have a lot to offer to our respective countries. As my institute, ZEF, at Bonn University, about 80% of PhD graduates return to their home country to take up key positions in governments, research institutions, the private sector, and the other organizations. Transforming rural Africa is a necessity for our continent, Africa, to ensure food security and generate jobs and rural businesses. Let me now ask Dr. Stefan Schmitz, Deputy Director General of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, to share his welcoming remarks.
Good evening, distinguished guests, dear ladies and gentlemen. It's always been a great honor for me to be allowed to speak in a place where Albert Einstein and others gave presentations. I think it's a great place here. This year, I was given the opportunity to travel through Malawi, Zambia, Kenya, Rwanda. Was particularly interested in the rural areas of that. And I was really overwhelmed by the sheer number of young people living there. And their number is still to grow. At the same time, I've seen in these rural, remote areas not one tractor in the field. The only tractor I saw was on one rural airport, the tractor taxiing the airplanes for takeoff and landing. And I know that Africa, each and every year, imports agricultural products worth around 70 billion US dollars. A lot of people, no tractors, a lot of input of food. Something must still be wrong there in Africa. But things are changing. Africa is on the move, and rural Africa is on the move. All these young people are optimistic. They are keen to do a better job. Hardly anybody seems to be interested in continuing the job their fathers and mothers did without tractor, without any machinery. They are keen, they are eager to do a different kind of agriculture, to do it as a business, to work in the agriculture and food sector, really to improve their rural livelihoods and to improve the situation of Africa in general. These young people are willing and able to lead. And it's great to see so many African young people here tonight. Africa is on the move, and you are part of the leadership that is needed to keep it on the move and lead Africa into another future. AGRA, the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, is one of the champions, one of the change agents in that process. And therefore, we are happy and proud to be able to partner with AGRA. This process just has started. It plays an important role within our One World, No Hunger initiative. Broaden the network of like-minded people, aiming for a better rural world, aiming for a world without hunger and malnutrition. Thank you very much.
Before I introduce or welcome to the stage our respected speaker, I would like to remind you that we will be live streaming and we will also be tweeting, and you can also tweet with hashtag Strife in Berlin and hashtag how will you lead. So I would like to know you know that. Good. It's now an honor to welcome on stage Mr. Strife Masivo tonight. Mr. Masiyiwa is, of course, possible to mention a lot, but let me say a few about him. He is the founder and the chairman of the Econet Group, a Pan-African communications, media, and technology company with operations and investment in 29 countries. He has been selected twice in 2014 and 2017 to Fortune magazine's list of the world's 50 greatest leaders. Over 3.4 million young people from across Africa follow him on Facebook, making him the business leader with the most engaging following in the world. In his remark, I personally hope that Mr. Masiyiwa will share his insight about what African youth should do to get into entrepreneurship to change rural Africa. I wish us all a stimulating evening. Please join me, Mr. Masiyiwa, to the stage.
Africa's got a lot of talent. I'm looking forward to seeing you back home. You said government, academia, private sector. I would turn it around, say come to private sector, we'll train you first and then you go run the country, okay? I think we'll be fine. Thank you so much for those kind remarks. Good evening and welcome. Let me just share with you a few thoughts. First of all, I'm pleased to see so many young Africans here. I bring you greetings from home. We hope to see you for Christmas. I'd like to also thank our gracious co-hosts, Humboldt University and the University of Bonn. I hear we have quite a number of students that came through from Bonn University. Can you just wave your hand? Wow, thank you for coming. Thank you for making the journey. And it's great to be in this great city, in this great country, Germany. Both its government and so many of its people and institutions are showing global leadership in issues of development, which we all dearly appreciate. My hope is to engage you tonight on part of the world that Germany is helping to unleash its full potential, Africa. I want to talk about how this century that we live in can and must be Africa's century. I'm not simply saying this because I am African. I say it because of the progress I'm seeing around the continent, as well as the promise I'm also seeing. We are seeing innovation, we're seeing entrepreneurship, and we're seeing extraordinary energy. Let me share a few reflections on why I hold this view that this will be and must become Africa's century. I'll then open our discussion, which I much prefer to be sitting there and having a chat, particularly with our friends on Facebook. Africa is on the move, and the signs of progress are everywhere. But we must never lose sight of the fact that we are 54 sovereign countries. There is a country called Africa, but there is the nation of Africa, shall I put it that way, but it is 54 sovereign countries. We have seen some of the fastest growing economies. How many would believe today that the continental Africa's economy has grown by 35% between 2000 and 2014. In some countries, it has even doubled. In Africa, when conditions are right, positive change can happen fast. Things are continually getting better. But I'm also a realist to say to you, we have some extraordinary challenges ahead of us. And it is a good thing to be speaking to the generation that must soon be seized with taking us to the next phase of our journey. I believe the same level of transformation that I saw in the field of technology and communications. It was fascinating this evening. A German colleague walked up to me and he gave me something. Can you stand up and just introduce yourself?
I was Africa correspondent for the FAZ for 13 years. And at that time we were already in exile because we were threatened with death, so we only had telephone calls in
So he gave me this interview that he did in 1998 when I had fled. I'm still trying to get home, by the way. Getting there soon. Things are changing. But a lot has changed since that time. And I'm extremely hopeful about the change that will build Africa's century. But there's no nation or continent that ever lifted itself up without a major transformation in the field of agriculture. I might be a telecommunications entrepreneur, but I'm here to tell you today that ground zero in our transformation and change must be in agriculture. It is the surest inclusive path that we can take to begin to address most of the challenges that face us, whether they be economic, political, or security. I shared this earlier on today with some of our colleagues, how I traveled to Mali with our late brother Kofi Annan. And as we were walking around in rural Mali, we made three key observations that we later discussed in our delegation. Most of the farmers were women. 70% of Africa's farmers are women. And most of them were middle-aged or older. At the same time, so our young people are not farming. At the same time, as my colleague rightly pointed out, we are importing $70 billion worth of food every year. We also observed while we were walking around in rural Mali that young men were roaming around. And Kofi Annan, who once headed UN's Peace and Security Commission, immediately pointed out to me, he said, that is trouble. 6 months did not go by before Mali was thrown into a great crisis. You could not go today to the places that we drove just outside the Malian capital. It was almost overrun. The third observation we made came from the people themselves. They said, our crops are not growing. The seasons are changing. Scientists are debating, I'm told. Well, I think the scientists aren't debating, but the politicians are debating. Scientists call it climate change. I learned about it in Mali. So we may have to send a few of our leaders there to go and learn about climate change. So we are faced with extraordinary challenges, but we are also have some opportunities. And I believe that the lowest hanging fruit for us lies with agriculture. Fortunately, even though, as Kofi Annan used to say, Africa is the only region of the world that did not have a green revolution. The United States had a green revolution. Japan had a green revolution. Europe had a green revolution. Asia had a green revolution. But Africa did not have a green revolution. And that is what must seize us with a great urgency today. Africa's green revolution has begun. But to complete that, it will need your generation. Here I'm talking to the young Africans and their colleagues, because we will not be able to do it alone. We will need the help of our friends. I'm here this week in Berlin because we were invited here to have the board meeting of AGRA. The last time I was here, I was with Kofi Annan, and we came a delegation to see the Chancellor. And she spent the better part of an hour. Oh, I see the picture. That funny-looking guy is our friend who sang Band-Aid. Remember him? Bob Geldof. But here's the thing. Bob Geldof, this was the Africa Progress Panel. And we went to see Angela Merkel because she had invited us to talk about what we could do. And we said, let's partner. Let's work in agriculture. Bob Geldof led the Band-Aid, Hunger in Ethiopia. A member of our board is the former Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Haile Mariam. It cannot happen today because we have made progress. Does it mean that we don't have children going to bed hungry? Yes, we do. But we have made progress, but we have to complete the job. And that is why I'm here to appeal to you. Join us. Now, that doesn't mean I want you all to be all farmers, but it wouldn't be so bad, it wouldn't harm you. We at AGRA, over the last 12 years, have tried to build a platform with African governments aimed at catalyzing, you call it today, being an accelerator to African agricultural transformation. We look at the entire value chain. We are completely persuaded that Africa's green revolution will take place. Our real focus is how will it take place? We believe that the center to a successful and sustainable green revolution in Africa is the smallholder farmer. As a businessman, I like to know my customer. In this mission, my customer is the smallholder farmer. How we are focused on how do we increase their productivity? How do we increase the incomes that they are generating? How do we help them produce more food and get more food to market? It's not enough to produce more food. They have to be able to get that food to market. They have to be able to get the correct prices for that food. How do I know? Because that's what they told us they want. Because we're interested in what they want. Not what we want for them, but what they want. What they told us when we were walking in rural Mali. And that's what we've been saying to our partners. Help us to help them. Support us to help them. That meeting was part of a process that has gone for a number of years. My dear friend who's standing in the very corner there came all the way here. Please stand up, Peter, and say hello. So Peter Eigen, is a member of the Africa Progress Panel. Because with all these things, we need to be partners. Some of you have been sent here by my good friend, Professor Joachim von Braun, who couldn't be here with us. But these are champions of a global citizenship that we must all work on together. Now, that global citizenship is not about just smallholder farmers. It also includes civil society. One of the things Kofi Annan always insisted, and it was new to me, I must admit. He says, you got to let these civil society guys in the room and let them shout at you. You're going to learn something. He taught us to have respect for the voice of civil society. We're happy to engage and discuss and include you, just like we finance farmers' organizations so that farmers themselves can be organized for what they need. In Europe, the farmers are organized. Some would say too organized, but they're organized. We want our farmers to be organized. But at the end of the day, it's not donor funding that will develop African agriculture. We are the first to tell you here now. Okay? It is about government policies in Africa, committed governments, committed African leaders, progressive African leaders. And when those progressive African leaders have retired, we've gone to get them out of retirement and say, it didn't say retire, it meant new tires. One of them is His Excellency President Kikwete, who sits on our board, and I recognize him here with us this evening. Thank you, sir. As leader of Tanzania, he was one of the champions on the global stage that enabled us to build this platform. As are many others, my brother Kanayo Kawanze, who's sitting right here, who used to run IFAD, and so many others that are here that form part of this board. So, without much ado, let's have a conversation, shall we? Thank you very much, Germany. We appreciate your support and your commitment. We know with this great locomotive called Germany now thugging behind us, Africa's future can only be brighter. Thank you for your kind remarks.
Now, the time has come for you, the youth. Our moderator tonight is Mr. Fred Swaniker. He is also a Ghanaian entrepreneur, and as a founder and the chairman of Africa Leadership Academy, Mr. Swaniker is another inspirational leader for many African youth. He was nominated World Economic Forum Young Global Leader in 2012 and one of the top 10 young powerful men in Africa by Forbes magazine. So I really encourage you to share your thoughts, what's on your mind with these inspirational leaders. Use the opportunity, please. Thank you, Fred.
Hello, can you hear me? Great. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here in Berlin, and thank you, Strife, for those wonderful remarks. And also, I want to make a special shout out to all of Mr. Masiyiwa's fans who are following on Facebook. 3 million, more than 3 million people are watching this live, I'm sure. So I'd like to, I'm just going to have open up with a couple of questions for Strive, and then we'll open up to the audience for you to engage in an interactive discussion. So, Strive, one of the things that in my daily life, I work with a lot of young people, right? We're trying to train about 3 million African leaders over the next couple of decades. And so I often ask these young people what they want to do? In what ways do they want to lead and be entrepreneurs? And they throw out terms like they want to build the next blockchain startup, or they talk about fintech, or they want to build apps, and maybe some of them want to do fashion. But very few of them tell me that they want to go into agriculture. And here we are talking about agriculture, and here we have, many young people in the room. So what is your message to young people? Why does agriculture matter? What would you say to the people in this room about why they should even consider this in their future?
Great. Thanks, Fred. I mean, I'm being interviewed by Fred. Hey, guys, this is a big deal. If you're from Africa, you know this is a big deal. Thank you, Fred, for the privilege. One of our colleagues on AGRA, who was vice president of AGRA, Akina Deshina, who now runs the African Development Bank, always would correct you if you said agriculture. He would say agribusiness. Okay? We need to move on from agriculture. Agribusiness. Okay, you're in blockchain. Bring it to agribusiness, okay? You are in, whatever it is you are doing, okay? The opportunity in agribusiness is the greatest entrepreneurship opportunity in Africa. Let me tell you guys, if you don't take it, they're going to come and take it. It's up to you. No one is going to, nature was, I heard that Einstein was here, so maybe I'll steal something from one of these great scientists. Nature abhors a vacuum, so does entrepreneurship, okay? This is the greatest entrepreneurial opportunity. So it really, this great value chain that Africa's agriculture needs young people to come and increase the productivity levels. Okay? So bring whatever it is you have. Let's use it.
Great. Thank you. So it's the greatest opportunity of this century. You heard it very much from the man. And if anyone knows about business, it's Mr. Masiyiwa. He recognized trends 20 years ago when the mobile phone was coming out. Would you say that agriculture is the next big thing?
Oh, it's bigger. Look, you know the numbers, Fred. Okay, by the turn of this century, 40% of the world's population will be African. Okay, just think about that. Most of our cities that today are sitting on under 50%, we've got under 50% urbanization. There will be cities the size of Lagos today. There'll be 10, 15 major cities of that size around Africa. Okay? That is an opportunity for this generation. Providing food security, providing food for new urban cities that will emerge. How can that not be a great opportunity?
So, just get to a bit more detail. You teach a lot about entrepreneurship on your Facebook page. Today, over 70% of the cocoa is grown in Ghana and Ivory Coast. I come from Ghana. But when I travel around the world, I have never seen a Ghanaian chocolate brand. I buy Lindt from Switzerland and Nestle. What is the one in Germany? Kinder.
Don't go there, Fred. Yeah. We'll start talking about Unilever and Nestle and so forth.
What's it going to take to get an African chocolate brand on the scale of a Nestle or a Lindt?
Starbucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, entrepreneurship. Okay?
But how?
So it's the answer is not to go out and regulate and say, no, you cannot, you have to do processing and what have you. Our focus is to get the entrepreneurs moving. It is the entrepreneurs in Africa who will go out and create our brands in using this raw material. Of course, we need good policy. Where's the president? Is he still here? President, don't forget the policies for us. But in reality, it's going to be about driving entrepreneurship and innovation, a whole new mindset, which is what I try to talk about.
The last question before I turn over to the audience. You know, in Africa, when you solve one issue, it normally has many, many ripple effects. Very few things can be seen in isolation, right? There's so many things that are interconnected. So, in your opinion, Strife, what are all the different opportunities that are going to be unlocked if we unlock this potential in agriculture that we have?
As I said before, we can keep looking at those numbers. It's all in the numbers. This is what I'm always saying to our entrepreneurs. Look at the numbers. 60% of the world's unutilized agricultural land is in Africa. Okay? We're just opening up African trade. You know, we've spent the last, you and I have been involved in that little bit about the Continental Free Trade Area, opening up trade between African countries. The lowest trade, if you look at intra-American trade, intra-European trade, Asian trade, they're all over 50%. Africa, 15%. Just opening up the movement of agricultural product in Africa. And here, I'm going beyond just arable land. What about our rivers, our lakes, our fisheries, our animal husbandry? All that is just an opportunity waiting to be opened up. So for us to really get our continent moving, both to meet the demographic challenge that is emerging before us and to turn it into a dividend, we're going to really have to raise our game. And it also begins with skills development where you are. I mean, this man has the ambition to educate 3 million people in his institutions at a given time, not in his lifetime. And he's well on his way to do it. So you know what it means.
Thank you, Strife. I'd like to now open up for questions from the audience. And if I may ask, please stand when when I call on you, so that you can be seen by the cameras, and then also introduce yourself before you ask your question. So I think there's a question here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Strife Masiyiwa. It's really an opportunity to attend this. So my name is Anita Dong from Uganda, but currently at a PhD student with Center for Development Research. So Mr. Strife, I'm just following up on one of the observations that you made in Mali. You said in Mali, when you went with Mr. Kofi, the people that you saw participate in agriculture were rural women. So my question is what is it that we should do to enhance the role of rural women in the transformation of the agriculture that we want to see as Africa? Thank you.
Thank you for that great question. The women produce 70% of the food that we eat in Africa, yet they don't own the land. Land rights is a fundamental piece, but not only giving them access to land, but giving them the security that comes with land. And as you know, I mean, in 54 countries, there are many, many different approaches to it. You've got Rwanda at one extreme, to whom, if you go into a Rwandan village, and I was in a Rwandan village recently, the women came out and showed me their title deeds to their land. to others that say, well, look, you are interfering with our culture. But even if you cannot deliver to them a piece of paper that says this is your right, there are many ways by which we can approach empowerment of women. We've got to empower young girls. We've got to do more to educate girls. The greatest multiplier to economic growth in Africa is to educate the girl child, number one. Nothing will give us a better return on our growth than that. So we've got to ensure that girls have access to education all the way, not where they can drop out at 14 and 15 and get married. That's not going to help us. We want more Annies with PhDs. Okay? That's my ground zero.
More Annies with PhDs, you heard that. Okay, let's take a couple of questions. So, gentleman there first. Can we get the microphone too, please?
Thank you very much. Much appreciating your talk. My name is Antonio Gola, PhD student at the University of Bonn. I would just like to know from you, because you talked about the role of increasing productivity of smallholder farmers, and you talked about agricultural revolution in Africa, which I agree. But I would like to know from you the role of education, especially African education system, because I think the African education system focuses more on learning European history and all that. So may I know from you your thoughts on the role of African education system in agriculture? That is one. And then number two, my second question would be on the role of what I would call the regimes of translation. For example, change of political leadership from one political leader to another, like the president. A case study of Tanzania, looking at the Southern Agricultural Growth Corridor of Tanzania, which was actually the brainchild of President Jakaya Kikwete. Now, there's another president who is actually not for that particular agricultural scheme. So what would you say about the role of different regimes? Because I think that is something really important as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Let me, oh, sorry, Fred, you're going to say?
Should we just take a couple more questions and then you
Sure,
comment?
sure,
Yeah.
carry on.
Let's have the young lady.
Young-ish.
Young-ish.
So I'm Matida Ndlovu, an alumna of the Kofi Annan Business Schools Foundation, and I'm also a fellow Zimbabwean. Currently I work for a venture capital fund, and I'm interested, Mr. Masiyiwa, in your views on the nexus between technology and agriculture. How can telecoms companies like Econet be used as a platform to amplify the impact of agribusiness on the African continent? Are you actively investing in tech-fired agricultural ventures?
Thank you.
Let me start with my favorite question. I mean, my fellow Zimbabwean. There are 1.5 million smallholder farmers in Zimbabwe. Did you know EcoFarmer, our technology platform for smallholder farmers, has 1 million of them using our services every day? But they on that platform, they get information on what to grow, where to grow, tips on agriculture, and I want to do more. I wish I could get the same statistics out of that country called Nigeria. Then I will overtake Aliko. So, you know, agriculture, technology in agriculture is central to achieving productivity. You heard that story about one tractor in 5-6 countries you went to, Stefan? One tractor. Okay, before we talk about blockchain, how about some tractors? Okay, because that rural African woman whom we talked about has got a hoe. Don't take pictures of her and romanticize it, because it's a terrible tragedy in the 21st century to assign somebody to produce food with a hoe. It belongs in the Berlin Museum. Better still, the African Museum. So, you know, we need to see technology at play in agricultural transformation. So I'm fully much in support of that. So whether it's telecommunications technology, blockchain technologies, storage technologies, we're calling on young people to come and solve the problem of food waste. Because it's nothing more tragic than having such a low productivity on food production, only to lose 40% of it through waste. That too, we need new solutions for storage and movement of food. And while I'm at it, I'll not address Tanzanian politics. I watch CNN, so I watch more American politics. I'm only kidding, but you know, you are going to be, the question you've asked, you are better positioned to answer it because you are from Tanzania. So I'll not engage on that. Let me rather talk about the African education system for agriculture. If you, in AGRA, for instance, we realized that if we were going to see increased productivity, particularly around crops that are traditional to our own food, there's no big international food company that's going to come and produce sorghum and millet and our cassava. So we've invested in building and supporting African entrepreneurs start seed companies. But before you can do that, you need a PhD in the seed sector. So guess what? We've produced over 500 PhDs and MScs in the seed industry, looking at ways to improve soil health, looking at ways to improve seed systems, okay, to meet the requirements of our own people and the orphaned crops that we have to maintain our own traditional seed systems. Not by playing and engineering with them, no. We don't need to get into all that. We'll leave it to the scientists elsewhere. Our focus is how do we apply science to improve all aspects of agriculture, which means we need agriculture economists. We need to see more, so it's not just about scientists. We want to see every aspect of what drives the agricultural food chain. So that's on education. Right, Fred?
Yeah, we'll take on a few more questions. This side. Everyone wants to ask you a question.
Right. So suddenly,
people
did I say
finally woke
something?
Okay, thank you. My name is Joshua. I'm from Ghana as well. Really nice to see you and meet you in person. Strife, it's really impressive what you open our mindsets to with the agricultural revolution in Africa now. And there's no doubt about the relation with technology and agriculture. And I work with SMEs a lot in Accra and also in rural areas. And I mean, there are two projects which are really interesting. One, consolidating farmers, smallholder farmers, so they can have access to financing. And another one is also like what you said in Mali, having access to tractors. But then they don't have the money, but if you're able to move one tractor to one place and have a shared cost for multiple farmers, that is easy. And we're just doing this through app and stuff like that. That is all true, and you talk about trade within Africa. The fundamental thing which you mentioned was about policy. And usually SMEs don't have that much power to influence policy. So my question to you as an economic giant would be, how do we rely also on your influence and other key players like you in the African context to drive policy change? And is this something that can come from economic giants like you, or it should be a radical also revolution of SMEs and smallholder people just
hit on the street and go in the radical way to say, this is what we need. Thank you.
Well, I think we should invite you to come and work for AGRA, because that's exactly what we're trying to do. You don't need a giant. I'm not a giant. I'm a little guy. Can't you see? So this is exactly what Kofi Annan had in the creation of AGRA. Okay? How do we advocate for the SMEs? Remember I said agribusiness. So the SMEs we envisaged in agribusiness, whether they are working at the farm level of producing food or they are in some aspect of it. You're a smart guy. You're now already telling me that you're going to have Uber Tractor now. Okay? Why not? Go develop the app and let's have an Uber Tractor so that we can go around 100 smallholder farmers so that when he comes, we'll have 10 tractors. Okay? So this is an application of technology. And by the way, there are young entrepreneurs in Africa already working in that area. Okay? So, but you mentioned policy. It's critical. The whole AGRA model is designed to work with governments in Africa. They are the ones who are working in the policy area, helping them work through their own national policies around agriculture, sharing best practices. That's why we need even former ministers. And by the way, on the AGRA board, we have former ministers, former prime ministers, former presidents, the former head of IFAD, the former head of World Food Program, former head of Rockefeller Foundation. That's what combined together makes the giant you are talking about, not this little guy here at the front, okay? But thanks for the question.
Just a couple more questions. You there? And then that gentleman at the back.
Hello?
Okay, you go first. You go ahead.
Sorry. Good evening, everybody. My name is Malik. I'm from Nigeria. I'm a master's student from the University of Hohenheim in Stuttgart. Actually, my question is actually very similar to what he asked, but I'm thinking there are a lot of papers on policy reforms in the agricultural sector for Africa, and it doesn't look like the people in government do not know this. It's like they know, but they are not backing it the right way. The implementation is the problem. So my question would be, what is AGRA doing to make the governments of African countries really ready to implement those policies and make them work?
Thank you. You know Akin Adesina, right?
Yes.
He was vice president of AGRA. So when we couldn't get the government to listen, we put the minister there, okay? And boy, didn't he do some great stuff. You agree, huh? He was an amazing agriculture minister, but I'm kidding. Of course, let me give a practical example from Nigeria, your great country, okay? 70% of the people are engaged in agriculture. 1% of the bank lending was going to agriculture. 1%. Okay? So as AGRA, when Sanusi was governor, we actually went as the AGRA board. And we had a meeting with the ministers. Actually, they came. We had a meeting with the governors, the governor of the central bank, the minister of agriculture, all the bank presidents, and they said they'd never met in that format before. And guess what? When we left, they committed $3 billion to agriculture. How about that? That's what we do as an accelerator, as AGRA, okay? Bringing the players together into a room to see how we don't necessarily hit people on the head, because it doesn't always have the result. Sometimes it does, but I'm talking, don't go throw stones now. But what I'm saying is, we can sometimes exchange ideas by coming in as a trusted third party into a conversation. I remember once traveling to Nigeria with Dr. Judith Rodin when she was head of the Rockefeller Foundation, and we met with the entire Economic Council of Nigeria, and we discussed these kind of ideas, and they were engaged. And change comes through over time. I was very hopeful and remain so. You're going to see great things in Nigeria. Thank you.
I'm going to take 3 questions from, I'd like the next 2 questions at least to be from women. There.
Thank you. Thank you for the insightful event. I'm Dorothy from Uganda. I'm a PhD student at ZEF, and I have a number of issues when it comes to youth involvement in agriculture. Of course, I've worked with youth for some time. One of the key issues is that the youth are willing to join agriculture, but there are a number of bottlenecks to that. One of the key issues is access to finance, access to credit, access to land, access to all the production inputs. And there comes in the issue of government will. How are our governments willing to support the youth to be involved in agriculture so that we make agriculture cool for the youth, as it's always termed? Then the other issue is about the programs. There are a number of programs that are being implemented. One of them is Enable Youth. It has been so far, the implementation has started in Nigeria, Ghana, and so far they have started a little bit of it in Uganda. But the issue is that the funding that goes to such programs, 50% of the funding ends up in administration costs, whereby a lot of the funds go to administration and a little bit goes to corruption. The officers supposed to implement just swindle the funds all around, and we end up not benefiting from such programs in developing the youth and transforming agriculture. How do we come in as researchers, as scientists, as policy makers, and as people in this room to improve the implementation of these programs? Thank you so much.
Let's take a couple more questions. Women, and someone from the back as well. Who hasn't? Is there a woman back there? Okay, there? Okay, you go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm really glad to be here today to hear this talk. I'm called Jen Katusime from Uganda, and I'm doing a PhD.
Something's going on here. Did you hear? All these women from Uganda, all doing PhDs. This is awesome. Thank you.
I'm doing a PhD in computer science at Humboldt University here in Berlin. I'm glad you talked about food waste. I'm very passionate about developing mobile applications for low resource settings, especially in health and agriculture. But the problem we have is, like you said, it's women who are doing most of this agriculture. When we take out these applications, well, train them to use it, but a time comes when they are producing like perishable products. Using these applications, they cannot market the perishable products within the short time, so they actually end up getting wasted. So my question is, does AGRA have a strong focus on food waste management, especially for perishable products? And I would like to note that as young people, we are ready to go back home and actually do agriculture. But as we all know, no young person who has gone to university wants to go to the garden with a hoe, and most of them actually prefer white-collar jobs. So while you call us to go home, I think the focus would be on how to help us turn agriculture into the white-collar jobs that we are looking for. Thank you very much.
Well, I can't promise about agriculture being a white-collar job.
No, what I mean is...
No, I hear you. Don't worry. Let me come back. We take one more question.
One more question,
and
yeah,
then I will answer
you answer
the
the
three.
question.
Yeah, okay. I'm Dorcas from Ghana, and I'm a master's student in studying cultural diplomacy and international relations. So my questions are two. I'm asking one for my colleague.
One
also.
question, please, only.
Choose your best one.
Choose the question. One question.
Okay, so to Mr. Strife, I want to ask, do you think that African socialism, which was brought about by Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana and Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, is better suited to be able to produce progressive government policies to help African development? And I would like to please switch it in. So with cultural diplomacy also, how can that improve agriculture with the made in Ghana goods, for instance? Like what he said, that you don't see Ghanaian chocolate in Europe or in any other market. So how can we also help? How can AGRA help with,
I wish AGRA could be all things to all men, you know. I wish I could do a review of African socialism for you, but wrong guy. You know, let me just kind of pick off a few things from the 4 comments that have come through. And I may not necessarily cover everything that you picked up. African youth. They're obviously center to anything we do in agriculture. The average age of Africa is 19. So whatever it is we are going to do about the future of Africa, we have to start thinking about the youth. Whether you look at that statistic as how many are under 30, the reality is the majority of Africa's population is young people. For us to turn that into a demographic dividend, it's not going to happen by itself. We have to focus on skills development across Africa. A major skills development with mass entrepreneurship on a scale the world hasn't seen, to be honest with you, because we have to create jobs. And agriculture gives us an opportunity. It's not the panacea for everything, but there is an opportunity given to us through agriculture. That's all I wanted to say about youth, not necessarily addressing it the way you put it to me. You talked about the challenges associated with implementation. We talked about issues of things like corruption. They are there. And technology also offers us an opportunity to address things like corruption. I give the example of Dr. Akina Adesina when he went to Nigeria. And he used mobile wallets to make disbursements directly to smallholder farmers. Others are beginning to use things like blockchain to trace the movement of agricultural product. There are so many things you can, even just social media, exposing corruption, so let us use all the tools at our disposal to deal with corruption. Because given our challenge, corruption is the greatest tragedy that we see. But we mustn't become consumed over it, okay? There are good tools out there of transparency, running our organizations efficiently. We talk of AGRA, we deal with all sorts of donors. And the key to how an institution like that operates is to ensure there is no corruption in the way resources are used, and the percentage, we set specific percentages of how much of our resources will be applied to administration so that it's not frittered away. And there's constant monitoring, evaluation, auditing, and so forth. Then my friend there talked about food waste. It's again, and you asked about AGRA's work in food waste. Just before Dr. Rodin stepped down as head of Rockefeller Foundation, which is one of the founding donors of AGRA, we approved a massive program, probably the largest ever, just to address food waste. Because we realized that it's one thing to talk about increasing yield and improved seeds and so forth. If the food is then wasted because it perishes too quickly, then what are we doing? So AGRA is putting resources into finding solutions for locally based storage methods that allow for food not to perish. But there is a lot more work we need to do with cold chain and ensuring that food is getting to urban markets and can be stored and so forth. Transport system. It's complex, and our mandate is not that wide as AGRA, but to the extent that we can put a searchlight on it and bring partners like the German government here to help us in areas like this, we will definitely be looking to it. But again, it's a challenge to you scientists here. Get to it. Food waste. Let's cut it in half. I guess, Fred, we're coming close to the end here.
Yep.
So, Dorcas and African socialism. Did I answer that?
No, you didn't.
I don't know anything about African socialism, Dorcas. You know that. I'm a capitalist. I'm here to make money. Listen, I don't... I never met Kwame Nkrumah, but I love Kwame Nkrumah. I love Julius Nyerere. He did a great job in helping to liberate my own country. It was their generation. They had their mission, which was to decolonize us and to bring us together. Julius Nyerere was asked at the end of his life, "But what did you do about the economy?" He said, "That wasn't my job. I came to decolonize the country. It's your job." So we don't have to spend time thinking about socialism or whatever ism is out there. Let's talk about how we raise the prosperity of our people in an inclusive way. That's easy to understand. That is our mission in this generation. Thank you.
So we'll take two last questions. One is from that gentleman at the back. And then I'd like to give a chance to a German student to ask a question as well.
Thank you very much. My name is Ajayi Opeyemi. I'm a master's student here at the University of Applied Sciences. Very excited to be here. I'm from Nigeria. And talking about inclusiveness in the Green Revolution that probably we are trying to catch up with. I must admit that you said something very, very important about us being left behind and having to catch up. But thinking about why youths don't go into agriculture and why we are having more of technological revolution, more in Africa than agricultural revolution, it's all still boiled down on some of the things you mentioned, from financial inclusion, policy for right protection. I want to ask, what's your view on cluster formations? It's because entrepreneurship has to do with scalability, and nobody wants to go into a business that will not last for the next 20 years. So if I'm dedicating my life to agro-business, I want to be sure it's something that stands next 20 years. So what is your organization doing in this regard? That would be one. Two is my observation also about Africa having possibility of breaking free. But we have industrialists who are importing agricultural products. I'm from Nigeria. It's a practical example of what I'm talking about. So what's the possibility that government will support young people to be able to do something substantial in this area? Because it's just beyond us really wishing to do some of these things. It goes to how are we going to get to where we want to go. Thank you.
Okay, last question. Is there a German student who wants to ask a question? Okay, we have one man there.
Yeah, let's have one or two Germans.
That guy back there.
Oh, sorry. Good evening. My name is Robert Meyer. I'm from Leipzig University, a PhD student, and also part of CEPT, which is a program that deals with entrepreneurship promotion. I met a couple of years ago a young man. He was owning a shop in Zanzibar, and he was telling me, you know, the government should bring a company to process all these oranges. And actually this comment stuck my mind because he was asking the government to bring this company. So my question to you as distinguished entrepreneurs, what can we do to encourage people to take it on their own, to take the opportunities themselves instead of asking the government to do it? Thank you.
Okay, last question. You've been putting out this woman here. Last question here. No. This woman, she's been putting her hand up for a long time here. Can we get the microphone here, please? Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Evelyn, and I'm from Nigeria doing PhD at Center for Development Research. A lot of comments about the challenges to developing the agricultural sector, and I have two questions. First, because I come from Nigeria and I know a few of those challenges. For every agribusiness, we want to maximize our profits. So some of the things that would probably hinder the maximization of profits is because for the African system, we have a lot of scattered agricultural sectors. We have the rural areas where the agriculture is produced, and then we have the urban centers where the market actually exists. So in between the rural sector and the urban sector, we have a lot of infrastructural gap, bad roads, for example. How do the farmers or entrepreneurs who are trying to maximize their own profits deal with these very crucial infrastructural challenges without losing their profits? That's one question. Second question is, we talk about things like the new trend in bioeconomy, which the African agricultural system has a very huge advantage at. We can produce the raw materials, we have the land, we have the resources, we have the cheap labor. Let's use it in quotes. However, for a country like Nigeria that depends on oil exports, how would that country be willing, as an alternative to producing fossil-based products, which would not only improve on our environmental sustainability, but also on our economic and inclusive growth for the rural poor? How is this policy incentive going to materialize, given that there will be some trade-offs against national prosperity and equitable distribution of this wealth? Thank you so much.
I'm gonna start with you. Don't sit down. You're doing a PhD, right?
Yeah, sure.
How come you're asking me so many questions? You tell me the answers, because that's why you're doing a PhD. You're the smart one. If you guys were so smart, okay, you're the best that we have. Come on, guys. Don't ask questions. Answer them. We need you to come home with the answers. That's my challenge to you. I'm not going to answer those questions because you must answer them. You must solve these problems. You heard what our friend from Germany said. That should disturb us. We have a governance model in place that says government, 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 government. That's not to say we should let them off the hook, but there's a lot we can do. There's a lot of solutions we can find. If you want to be successful, identify a need and reach out to solve it. All these are just opportunities for us. You may sit, ma'am. You see, that's why we're here. I'll close the funny story of my grandmother. You see, I studied electrical engineering. And I was away from my home country for, God knows, 20 years or something. So I returned home. And I visit my grandmother, who died about 2 years ago. She was 106 when she died. And she called all the rural women together. And she danced and she said, "My grandson is back. You're all going to get electricity." I said, "Grandmother, there's no electricity here." She said, "But didn't you go to England?" You are in Germany. Bring the solutions. And it's not just to you. All those guys on Facebook out there in African universities, Stanford, wherever our best and brightest are. You see these problems? Seize the moment. Let's solve the problems. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for giving me such a lovely time. God bless you and see you back home, every one of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Strive. Always such an inspiration hearing from you. Thank you very much.
So, time is limiting us. It is really inspiring and motivating. As Mr. Masiyiwa said, Africa has begun the Green Revolution. I'm challenged tonight. It's up to us, African youth, to finish the business. So I encourage you to continue socializing, connecting, and capitalize on the discussions. From now on, we'll have a reception waiting us outside. But before that, I'm asking African youth to remain here to have a photo with this inspiring, motivational speaker. You call it whatever you want. So let's have a group photo, but let's continue discussing, chatting about this important thing. Thank you so much for attending.